I'm going to show you the chemical test for water. And this is something you've probably encountered before, but we just want to show you this again as part of this unit. So the chemical we use to test for water is anhydrous copper sulfate. We keep anhydrous copper sulfate in what we call a desiccator, and that just keeps it in a moisture-free environment. So the desiccator, its job is to remove any moisture, because we want this copper sulfate to be anhydrous. That means copper sulfate without water. We saw earlier solutions of copper sulfate and our hydrated copper sulfate crystals, and they were blue, and that's because they have water in them, either in solution or bonded to the crystals. But anhydrous copper sulfate is copper sulfate without the water, and you can see from this that actually makes its colour white. So I'm going to put a bit of anhydrous copper sulfate on a watch glass. So here's my watch glass here, and I've got that on a heat-proof mat because this reaction lets out a lot of heat, so we just put a heat-proof mat to protect the bench. So you can see that anhydrous copper sulfate is white. And what I'm going to do is pour a little bit of water into my beaker. And we are going to test this to prove that it's water. Now, I know that this is water, but there's lots of other colourless solutions or liquids that we meet in chemistry, and not all of them contain water. And so therefore we can use this test to prove, does my colourless liquid contain water? And so I've got a little bit in my pipette here, and I'm just going to add a few drops to the anhydrous copper sulfate. And can you see the change that is happening? So hopefully you can see that as I add a few drops to the anhydrous copper sulfate, it's turning from white to blue. And that's because we are hydrating the salt. We are now making this hydrated copper sulfate, and its colour is blue. And hopefully you saw during that experiment, a little bit of a colourless gas was given off. That's just because we are producing a lot of heat in this reaction. That will cause some of the water to evaporate off. And if I put my fingers at the bottom of this, I know you won't be able to feel that via video, but this is extremely hot. This reaction is very exothermic, gives out a lot of heat as the bonds are formed between the copper sulfate and the water. So that's the chemical test for water. You take a few drops of your liquid that you're testing, and generally if it's a test, it's an unknown liquid. And you add that to anhydrous copper sulfate. You must make sure that you say anhydrous, because it needs to have no water to start with. And if the colour changes from white to blue, then we know that our liquid contains water. So that's the chemical test for water.